have you ever looked at the badge for AMG? Because it's quite interesting, I think. Half of it makes total sense because there's a valve spring and a cam, obviously related to engines. But the other half is a tree, specifically an apple tree. And that's because AMG is based in a Vaterbach, and a Vater in Old German means apple tree, Bach means stream. And the car we're here to drive today, well, it's an apple that hasn't fallen far from the tree.
Why is that? Well, when I think of AMGs, I tend to think of an inexorable surfeit of twisting force.
This is an absolute torque monster. 1,420 Newton meters, 1,047 pounds-feet of torque.
This is the new £180,000, 199 mile/hour hybrid 4MATIC Plus Mercedes AMG GT 63 SE Performance. And as well as having a name less memorable than a computer-generated password, it is the fastest accelerating series production AMG ever.
That is 0 to 62 miles an hour in 2.8 seconds.
That's quicker than the AMG ONE hypercar, which, lest we forget, has a Formula 1 engine in it. However, for all its apparent versatility, I think this hybrid GT's perfect use case is actually pretty narrow, and I think there might be another, more focused new AMG GT that's actually better. If this film apples your strudel, then do please think about joining the Hagerty Drivers Club. You get an award-winning magazine and myriad other benefits. To find out more, just click on the link below. We'll come back to the performance in a moment, but I just want to spend a second or two contemplating the new AMG GT's looks, because, in the words of Tony the Tiger, I think they're great. Specifically in this spec. Prior to seeing this, I never knew I wanted a gold leaf Alan Mann tribute colour scheme on a Mercedes, but I do now. And while I'm not generally a fan of an optional aero kit on something like a 911 Carrera or Aston Martin Vantage, I think it really works on this. The wing adding some aggression to the otherwise slightly amorphous rear. All this, and despite the incursion of the battery in the boot space, it's still genuinely practical with the little foldable rear seats. Right, back to the performance.
So how is this car making all that power then? Well, up the front we've got the now very familiar 4-litre turbocharged Hot V V8 putting out 604 brake horsepower. In the middle we've got a 9-speed gearbox, but there's another gearbox too, because at the back we've got the e-motor, and that's attached to a 2-speed gearbox, and we've got an e-diff as well, and on top of the motor we've got the 6.1 kilowatt hour battery, which they're praising for being able to stay at exactly the right temperature of around about sort of 45 degrees C, thanks to all the cooling and the special liquid that they've used to cool all the cells.
The e-motor puts out 201 brake horsepower, giving a system total of 805 bhp for the 4MATIC Plus system to deal with, which is 228 brake horsepower more than in a regular V8-only AMG GT 63. The gulf in maximum torque figures is a yawning 457 pounds-feet, although the hybrid does drop to a mere 796 pounds-feet in continuous use, narrowing the gap considerably. The overall weight penalty for the plug-in hybrid system is a hefty 220 kilos, or just under 500 pounds, although its placement actually improves the car's weight distribution from 54.46 to 51.49 front to back. What's more, the price difference is just £15,000, which is remarkably little when you consider all the extra hardware and the fact that it gets the carbon ceramic brakes as standard. Maximum electric-only range is 8 miles, which is not a lot, so you do need to consider how you deplete and replenish the battery.
As a result, we've now got 8 different modes in here, all sorts of ways of, well, recharging the battery, altering the regen, the sport mode, sport plus, race for track as well. It is phenomenally complicated. And I can't help wondering, who is this car for? I think the interior will definitely appeal to some people, but also definitely not appeal to all, because we have a large tablet sitting here with a sort of chrome surround. I like these chrome vents, they look very cool, like the turbines from a jet engine. Despite, well, It's sort of quite good because it's so large and it actually sits quite close, so it's very easy to navigate and reach like that. But it is also a large pad with very few physical buttons on here. However, I can see a certain sort of person liking this because there's just a lot to do. If you like the sort of videos where they say 29 reasons why you're not using your iPhone to its full capability, you'll probably like this interior. If you are the sort of person that actually enjoys going around your house and resetting everything after there's been a power cut, you'll probably like this interior. There's lots to tinker with.
It is phenomenally configurable and adjustable, with more menus than a chain of restaurants, and there are some very cool graphics. I love this IWC watch one.
One other thing about the interior that is worth mentioning is I would thoroughly recommend the sportier seats, because the standard ones you just sit a little bit too high, whereas these, well, feel actually more comfortable. Is this a car for a blast on a country road? Well, we have ourselves a really good piece of road here, threading its way through the beautiful trees. It's in some ways very impressive. The impressive bits of this, well, principally the suspension, actually. This has Mercedes' version of the sort of the virtual anti-roll bars, and it does a bewitching job over the bumps. If you want an example of just how good the suspension on this is, I've been driving it in Sport Plus on its firmest setting up and down this bit of road, and it just copes with the bumps absolutely fine. Because it's not crashing around, because it contains itself so well, it feels so composed in the corners. You really don't think that it is, well, 2.2 tons. Where you do still feel the weight, however, is under braking, because although we've got massive, great 420mm discs at the front, carbon ceramics on this, you just don't get the confidence through the pedal. The non-E Performance version certainly had no problems with its braking, so it must be to do with the regen and the extra couple of 100 kilos that this car's carrying.
In everyday driving, you can wind up the regen to have almost one pedal operation, which I quite like, but drive hard and you have to push disconcertingly far into the pedal travel looking for decent bite, resulting in that slightly unnerving runaway feeling. Arguably, the reduction in unsprung mass from the carbon ceramics contributes to the GT's ability over bumps, but I think that the active ride system deserves most of the credit.
As well as the ride quality of this, the other thing that's phenomenal is the traction. Given all that power and torque, you might think that it would be a bit of a scrappy mess, but you can actually use it. It's extraordinary. It means it's not the most playful, even when you find a way to turn everything off. There is a drift mode, but they sort of hide that away so much that they really sort of don't want you to use it. But the traction out of corners is just phenomenal. This is not a particularly wide bit of road, but it's very easy to thread it down it, and the rear wheel steering definitely helps with that. The steering itself feels relatively weighty when you first get into it, but actually is pretty light on feedback, which is a shame, so it's not really the most satisfying to use. It's relatively accurate, but the whole car doesn't seem to tack into turns quite as well as the non-hybrid version of this car. Given then that this is not a car for twisting country roads, certainly up above about sort of 6/10, it's obviously not going to be a track car either. However, there is one of these that is designed more for the track.
This is the GT Pro, a track-optimised version of the non-hybrid standard AMG GT 63, and this is Immendingen. I'm low-level obsessed with test tracks like this, and yet I had no idea this one existed. Opened in 2018, this vast facility is just for Mercedes. We were strictly limited in what we could film for fear of prematurely unveiling a new A-Class or something, but an onboard lap with this man is always worth watching. Bernd Schneider is the most successful DTM driver ever, with 5 titles. He's also a 2-time winner of the Nürburgring 24 Hours. He's also never knowingly lacking in commitment. On paper, the GT Pro isn't wildly different, with just 27 bhp and 37 pounds-feet more than the standard car. Or looked at in another way, it's the E Performance drivetrain without the E Performance. There's been a real focus on cooling, however, with new radiators to help the diffs and transmission. Aero tweaks also channel more air to the standard carbon ceramic brakes and reduce lift by 30 kilos. The rear seats are optional to save some weight, but what demonstrates AMG's confidence in the car and makes the biggest tangible difference to performance is the option to fit Michelin Cup 2R tyres.
The braking is
It's really good, huh?
really, really good, isn't it?
Yeah, the new cooling system is really good.
How long are the tyres lasting?
Yeah, in this circuit, it's half day because with this long wide handles, the front left tire suffers. Our engineers and test drivers asked to have this very long corners. It's a lot of fun, but it's hard through the tires.
Yeah. This circuit was designed by Hermann Tilke.
Yeah, right? Hermann Tilke designed the track, combined with our engineers and test drivers.
Because they're presumably looking for lots of lateral transitions and then long steady state corners for testing.
Have these humps and compressions to test ABS, traction control and all this stuff,
Yeah.
And also a bit the aerodynamics, depending on which cars you are the yellow.
Yeah. This has a little less lift, I think, is that right?
Yeah. I mean, this is more aerodynamic, and this very slow part is for mechanical traction like this.
Yeah.
It's very hard, this long wide and getting tighter in the end.
Yeah.
So to get the car into the corner, it's quite hard. And this is the reason they make this kind of elevation changes, over the hump braking, a car getting light, ABS, have to adapt itself. So this is the reason they built this kind of track.
Have they changed the suspension at all for this? Have they changed the geometry and stuff?
No, it's the same than in the GT before. And this is also the corner, over the hump, the car getting light, and then you're accelerating, and then you have to tail braking into the air packs. It's hard for the tires, hard for the car, but the car handles really good.
Hard for the passenger.
And that was it. Back to the pit area where there was a 2014 F1 car being warmed up, but not for me, sadly.
Have they let you have a go on the F1 car yet?
Yeah, it would be good to be in the F1, but it's for Luis.
Ah, fair enough. His retirement present.
Yeah, it would be good to have a run. I said already to the guys over there, they should let me do the installation laps today, and I can make a reference for Luis for tomorrow.
And with that, it was time to leave Immendingen and get back to the beautiful roads near the shores of Lake Constance in the E-Performance version of the GT. It is worth mentioning that this does have a very clever system if you do take it on track, whereby it tells you how to best deploy all the battery that you've got and therefore make the most of the performance. So you can just use all of it for sort of a one lap flat out qualifying mode, or if you're doing multiple laps, then it will tell you where on the circuit you should be using the full power and torque, including from the electric motor, and depleting the battery in order that you'll be able to regen it in the rest of the lap and keep going at maximum performance for multiple laps. So it won't be the outright performance, but it will be making the most of the battery that you have. It's a very clever system, and I sort of admire it, and I think it's quite interesting. But it feels a little bit like being given a fantastically delicious meal, but being told you can only eat 70% of it. Not that this is really a problem on the road, of course, where it always feels like there is a more than generous serving of performance. After the less than impressive C63S, which had the four-cylinder up front and the E-motor at the back, this is a big improvement on that. Obviously you've got a better soundtrack for a start, but it also just feels more cohesive and actually like it has the performance that it promises from its numbers. But where to use all that performance if not on a road like this or a track? Well, let's just say it's a good job we're in this particular country. This is a car made for Germany, specifically the Autobahn.
Imagine commuting between cities using all this wonderful performance, and it really does tramp on. And then you've got EV mode when you get there.
I saw 300 kilometers an hour on the Speedo shockingly easily, and this really did feel like its happy place. Although you do want to give yourself plenty of room, as the rear is pretty light under heavy high-speed braking. The Autobahn is admittedly a pretty narrow use case though, and ultimately more isn't more in the case of the AMG GT. The badge might be something of a hybrid, but I've yet to be convinced the cars from a fartherback should be. Instead, just get a regular V8 only 63, or perhaps the new Pro version, because at its core, a little Apple pun for those of you that have made it this far, this is a very good looking, sounding and complete GT.